Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, we only have distinguished ladies and gentlemen in the room and very strategic partners to this program. This program will only be a success when all of you get your hands into the intricacies of the program, and you will understand the project as Shane and I will explain a little later on. I was just trying to build a little time to usher in the minister. Mr. Kusal is the head of our capital campaign cabinet, and he's the guy that is responsible for raising the funds for Habitat, so don't be surprised if he asks you to borrow your checkbooks with signatures on it. Our chairman, Mr. Howell, will share a little bit as we begin the program, and he's responsible for the entire governance of Habitat for Humanity in Trinidad and Tobago. And then you will hear from Ernesto Castro, who's our director, area office vice president, and he's based in Costa Rica. And he will join us shortly. Two minutes again.
Good morning, everyone. Ooh, you all didn't drink coffee yet, boy. Good morning, everyone. Ernesto Castro Garcia, our area vice president, LAC, Habitat for Humanity. Ms. Monica Paul McLean, Senior Program Manager of the European Union Delegation to Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Graham King, Director of UE St. Augustine Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Ms. Jennifer Messiah, Habitat for Humanity National Director. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is certainly my pleasure to be here in front of you this morning as we launch our project BRC, Building Resilient Communities. As a former banker, every time for some strange reason I see that, I said RBC. What RBC doing inside of here? I was from Republic Bank, but maybe I'm a closet dyslexia person because I keep seeing BRC as RBC. But anyhow, it's BRC, Building Resilient Communities. I want to wish a warm welcome to you all for this official launch of Habitat for Humanity Trinidad and Tobago's project called Project BRC. As you will realize, and I guess for those of you who are in the construction industry, the project name also plays on the fortified steel BRC wire that they use in construction to strengthen the structure, and this gives a sneak insight to what this project is actually about. Good morning, sir. I acknowledge the Honorable Faris Alwari, Minister of Rural Development and Local Government. What's the jacket today? You're on the field today? All right, good. Well, we are honored that this is probably your first engagement for the day. Your third engagement? Wow. Oh, okay, good. Well, we're happy to have you here in person. We're missing the suit and the little, but we'll take this. A pleasure to have you here, Minister. Habitat for Humanity is traditionally known for building houses. However, over the last few years, we have expanded our offering to include training, neighborhood revitalization, and disaster mitigation and response type projects. This became necessary because at Habitat, we are people-centered, and therefore, our activities must reflect what is important to our people. Habitat TNT's disaster mitigation and community micro-project activities aimed at taking preemptive measures before the occurrence of an emergency or disaster in order to eliminate and or reduce the impacts and risks of hazards at the community level. This work should be considered with the highest priorities, as it often more times is more cost-effective to reduce the likelihood of the physical, social, and economic shocks even occurring than it is to respond to it or to deal with it afterwards. I mean, all of that to say prevention is better than cure, right? Even in Habitat. Our partners are our local and national government, businesses, civil society, to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. The goal of Project BRC is to identify vulnerable coastal communities within Trinidad and Tobago, select 10 of these communities for detailed assessment and mapping, and develop an action plan towards building resiliency for each community. The action plan then in turn forms the basis for other projects in the future. This will be facilitated through Habitat's participatory approach to safe shelter, settlements, awareness, assessments, and action plan. PASA, we call it PASA, so you have to tie up your tongue with that. This is a process in which a community assesses itself for vulnerability to hazards and its capacity to cope with them. The aim of PASA is to develop local capacity to reduce shelter-related risks by raising awareness and developing skills in joint analysis, learning, and decision-making at the community level. At the end of the process, an action plan is developed to increase the community's resiliency. Through PASA, a community works towards safe shelter, putting disaster emergency procedures in place and community empowerment through livelihood and capacity building initiatives. To empower communities as they self-evaluate for risk of disaster and their vulnerabilities and their capacities related to that risk. In addition, this process will be enhanced by adding the innovative feature of geospatial mapping and surveys. GIS surveys will be conducted to further identify vulnerabilities in the community with this information, and this is vital for responders in the case of any emerging disasters. This is the foundation for future projects over multiple years. The findings from PASA will offer valuable information to build communities' planning and development with greater care and consideration of the environment. A mechanism for monitoring will also be created and implemented for stakeholders. One of the major benefits of Project BRC is that it provides the forum for collaboration of many stakeholders, such as the Land Reclamation Committee, the Ministry of Works and Transport, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, the Tobago Emergency Relief Agency, the Institute of Marine Affairs, Fishermen's Association, and the Association of Village and Community Councils, to name a few. This collaboration, we hope, will eliminate duplication of efforts and create more sustainable activities toward national development. Also, by working in partnership with families, creating resilient communities, and building capacity to foster and grow self-reliant people. Another benefit is that it can be easily replicated in other communities and islands that are susceptible to climate change, especially rising sea levels. Ladies and gentlemen, I have provided a brief insight into what Habitat and Project BRC are about. We appreciate your presence here today and your involvement in this project. We urge you to continue to work with us as we build resilient communities in Trinidad and Tobago, and together we can get this done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Howell, for that welcome. And without further ado, I'd like to invite Mr. Ernesto Castro Garcia. He's the Area Vice President of Latin America and Caribbean, Habitat for Humanity. Mr. Ernesto.
Yes, thank you very much for the warm welcome. I hope you can hear me okay. First of all, I wish I could be there. Hopefully I couldn't. But it is a great privilege for me to be part of this very important event. And I would like to start acknowledging the presence of Honorable Person Rowley, national government, Monica Ping from the EU delegation, Dr. Team, Mr. Derwin Howell. We do in Habitat for Humanity. So a very warm welcome to all of you. It is for me a great pleasure to participate in this launch of a very important event. I think that all of us know and are aware of the implications of climate change in general, and in particular for a region like the Caribbean, where is by far the most disaster-prone area in Latin America and the Caribbean. And because of that, obviously, we are very happy to receive the support from the European Union and other very important strategic allies. As has been mentioned by Sidima in many different documents, we know that small island developing states are extremely vulnerable and exposed to natural disasters. And within these countries, we know that coastal communities suffer the most. And that is why this particular project is very relevant for Habitat for Humanity. And we hope that by the implementation of this project, we will be also contributing to the national government agenda and local governments as well. I think that Derwin already did a very good description of what the project is aiming, or the main objectives of the project. From Habitat for Humanity international perspective, as probably you are aware, we are an organization that is focused on housing and providing housing solutions for vulnerable families and communities. From that perspective, a project like this one is even more important because we will be supporting vulnerable communities, in this case, coastal communities, through a variety of interventions, as Derwin mentioned, not only house construction or reinforcement of construction practices, but also training, disaster risk reduction and mitigation, training through PASA methodology, so that communities can be more resilient. When we are able to support communities in that way, we are hoping that communities and families in particular will be able to thrive or through having a more resilient house and communities. And that is the importance of that kind of project for Habitat for Humanity. Not only the impact that we're hoping we will have in Trinidad and Tobago, but also the replicability of this kind of projects in other countries in the Caribbean, or even outside of Latin America and the Caribbean. And from that perspective, we are supporting 100% our national organization in Trinidad and Tobago. We will be providing support from the area office through our subject matter experts, who will be working side by side with the national organization. And in Habitat, we believe that we can generate a direct impact through our interventions. We can have a direct impact on families and people living in vulnerable conditions, but it is not only through construction practices or through building processes that we have in communities, but also through the influence that we could have. And in this particular project, we are hoping that we will be able to influence the construction code or national authorities. We are hoping that we will be able to contribute to the national agenda and the discussion around mitigation, disaster risk reduction through this project. So it is not only built, but also influencing in a positive way, so that we can generate a bigger impact. And again, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but also in many other countries and communities in the Caribbean. Once again, I want to thank the national government for the support and partnership in this project, the European Union for trusting us to implement this project. And we, the same way that we are working in many other countries, we trust and we hope that we will be continue being partners in many different projects, and also to the local partners and local communities that will be taking part of this project. And once again, thank you very much, and congratulations to Habitat Trinidad and Tobago. for for receiving this grant that I'm sure will have a very positive impact in these coastal communities and beyond Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much, and I hope you will have an excellent event.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Ernesto. So as mentioned before, there are a number of partners in this project's BRC. Unfortunately, the director and deputy director of SEDIMA would not be able to make it today due to other engagements. However, we do have Ms. Monica Paul McLean representing the European Union delegation to Trinidad and Tobago. She is the senior program manager, and could you just invite her forward, please?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Nice. Let me recognize the Honorable Faris Alwari, Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, Mr. Derwin Howell, Chairman Habitat TT, Mr. Ernesto Castro Garcia, Area Vice President, LAC Habitat for Humanity, Dr. Graham King, Director UB St. Augustine Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, Ms. Jennifer Messiah, and the rest of the Habitat for Humanity team here, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to represent the delegation of the European Union, and specifically my ambassador, Ambassador Cavendish, who is out of the country at the moment, but he sends his best regards. And he has also committed to visit at least one of the communities and participate in the assessment and mapping processes, as well as the community discussions during the project. So you have to hold him to that commitment, right? Okay. In the past, I have had the opportunity to engage with Habitat for Humanity and another initiative in the past. So it is really good to see Jennifer and the rest of the team still working relentlessly in pursuit of the organization's mandate. Habitat for Humanity won this grant in what was a highly competitive process. The project is part of a wider program to harness innovative technologies to support resilient settlement on the coastal zones of the Caribbean. The EU delegation in Trinidad and Tobago is especially pleased to be associated with this project since it complements a number of our main focal areas: innovation and civil society. First, let me talk a little about our innovation program. This was our flagship program for partnership with Trinidad and Tobago under the last programming cycle. It is financed by a contribution of TT 63.5 million, with 3.5 million in co-financing from the IDB. Right now it's implemented through Kariri. The main objective of this project is to facilitate the growth and development of the innovation ecosystem within Trinidad and Tobago by addressing three key challenges which stifles innovation among businesses: financing for commercial innovation, local firms' limited capacity to engage in research and development, and lack of collaboration amongst public agencies to support innovation. To date, we have awarded grants to 15 SMEs to a value of 12.5 million TT, as well as contributed to the ecosystem for innovation. Right now, it is happening at the Hyatt Hotel. Results of the second call, which will award similar grants to 15 more SMEs and 4 large firms, are being announced. Second, let's talk about the work we are doing with civil society, because Habitat is indeed a civil society organization. Since 2014, the delegation has been developing and implementing its support to civil society. During the period 2014 to 2020, we engaged civil society organizations in policy discussions on thematic issues such as the environment, climate change, and innovation. Human rights and governance issues were also discussed during these engagements. During that period, over 16.9 million TT in grant funds, as my ambassador liked to say. We only give grants, not loans. And technical assistance were provided. 37 civil society organizations were direct beneficiaries of these grants. And we have received additional allocations for the period 2022 to 2024 to the tune of 12 million TT for CSOs and of our human rights budgets. We are currently evaluating our recent CSO call, which was launched in February, and another grant targeting those organizations working in human rights and democracy will be launched later this year. Specific to the objectives of the project launched here today, there are opportunities to expand the scope and support for Caribbean countries through our Green Deal program, which is one of the focal areas under our Caribbean-EU partnership. One of the main elements which has a critical impact on the Caribbean small island developing states is that of climate change, with an increase in the quantity and intensity of natural disasters. The objective is to support the Caribbean to be more resilient to the impact of climate change and natural disasters. At the end of this program, it is expected that Caribbean natural resources and infrastructure will be better protected and managed in a responsible and sustainable manner, and that approaches to disaster risk reduction and/or management are implemented in line with the regional strategies for disaster risk management. Therefore, I've just given you a little summary of what we are doing at the EU delegation, and you will know that Habitat for Humanity, as one of the leading civil society organizations in Trinidad and Tobago, is about to implement this project, which is very much aligned to the work of the EU, bilaterally and regionally. We are therefore looking forward to continuing our engagement with the organization during and beyond the project. Let me therefore take this opportunity to extend congratulations and best wishes to Habitat for Humanity and all the stakeholders involved here. We look forward to continuing our involvement with you, not only partnered by pocket, but we are really involved in these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McLean. So as also mentioned before, Trinidad is not the only project. Project BRC is not the only one. So right now, I would like to invite Dr. Graham King, the director at the University of the West Indies St. Augustine Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, to discuss the Caribbean projects. Dr. King.
Thanks, Abigail. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Honourable Minister, welcome. Delegate from the European Union, Mrs. Monica Paul McLean. Mr. Ernesto Garcia, online, welcome. Mr. Doan Howell, Mrs. Jennifer Messiah. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to just take a few minutes and give an overview of the Hit Reset program. So as Monica mentioned, Hit Reset is an acronym standing for Harnessing Innovative Technologies to Improve Resilience, to support resilient settlements on the coastal zones of the Caribbean. And this is, of course, a very significant and important focal area, as the previous speakers would have mentioned as well, given the nature of vulnerability of the Caribbean. We face really existential threats in the Caribbean region to our very survival and our ability to continue to prosper economically. And the solutions, that we need to find are really indigenous solutions. In order to facilitate or leverage those indigenous solutions, what this program is seeking to do is to create a bridge between existing technology that's being used elsewhere and applying it to focus particularly on this issue of resilience in our coastal settlements. The OACPS Innovation Fund is the granting authority to Hit Reset. So it's actually a multi-layer program. It starts with the European Union. The European Union has financed this OACPS, Organization of African, Caribbean, Pacific States, R&I program. That's made up of 8 programs around the world, I think 2 in the Pacific, 3 or 4 in Africa, and 2 in the Caribbean. That doesn't add up to 8, but they're spread somehow around the region, around those 3 regions. And one of those is this project, the Hit Reset project. Really, Dr. Asad Mohammed is the brains behind it, and I think we can credit Perry Polar, our project manager as well, for going after this opportunity, which is really, it's a very substantial opportunity. The grant funding, the project overall is worth nearly 5 million euros, and the University of the West Indies is the executing agency for this Hit Reset project, which means we're not doing the work, we're getting other people to do the work. Habitat for Humanity, congratulations, we're getting you to do some of our work for us. So we're very pleased to have been able to select this BRC project, and Habitat for Humanity. The alignment between the proposal and the objectives of the Hit Reset program are very notable. one of the challenges we've had, one of the requirements coming from, on the program level, the OACPS level, is that any recipients, any beneficiaries, grantees on this program have to have a history, a track record of doing innovative projects up to a certain value. And that caused us a lot of problems to actually find suitable projects. But Habitat for Humanity, met those eligibility requirements, and we're very pleased about that, and have got this track record. So we have a lot of confidence in Habitat for Humanity's ability to bring a successful conclusion to the project. One of the main focal areas in these, all the projects across the board is the innovation element. When we're talking about harnessing innovative technologies, a lot of those technologies are associated with data and being able to map data. And I think that's also the focus of this project. Data is, a lot of people say data is the new oil. And that's because it's so important in our ability to respond to whatever situations arise. So this project is, and all the projects really are focused on the utilization of data acquisition, mapping. A lot of the projects have mapping elements in them, like this one does, GIS mapping. But then putting the information down on a map is one thing. The next thing is, how do you now use that information to leverage new knowledge and insights? And so, we're encouraging all the projects as well to kind of look for the step beyond capturing data, mapping it, and saying, how do we now use these data in a way that can generate new perspectives and new understandings? And I think that's something we'd really like to see come out of all our projects. To give you an overview of them, we have 9 projects in total under Hit Reset. I'm not going to go into details on them, but they spread across the Caribbean. We have 1 in Dominican Republic. We have 2 in Jamaica. We have 1 in Dominica. I always get into trouble from my wife for not being able to say Dominica correctly. So please, I can't hear where I'm going wrong, but apparently I don't pronounce it correctly. Dominica. Okay, thanks, Minister. Well, okay. I attribute that to my lack of sing-song Trinidad accent, right? And then we have 1 in Barbados, 3 in Trinidad and Tobago. The others in Trinidad are being run by Canary and, 4 actually, Canary, UTT, and Cardi. The Cardi project is actually straddling St. Lucia and Trinidad and Tobago. So we have a very nice spread of projects around the region looking at different topics, different issues. So for instance, the Cardi project is looking at resilience of our coconut trees to a particular South American weevil. This bug can infect the trees, and is largely undetectable until the tree's dead. And so the Cardi project is looking at ways in which you could actually detect that sooner using, I think, vibration devices, which it's attaching to the trees. It can pick up the motion of the larvae. And therefore, treatment can be applied to the tree, saving the tree. Of course, coconut trees, if you take the Manzanilla Mayaru stretch, for instance, they are a very important part of our defense structure against oncoming storms and so on, and they're an important economic industry. And so we have 2 good reasons there. So that's just one example. Another interesting project, which is also slightly different, Atom from Barbados, in conjunction with a company called, a startup called Rum and Sargassum. They are looking at mapping sargassum mats. So as the sargassum is coming in, that's a major threat to Tobago. I don't think we get it so much in Trinidad, but certainly in Tobago and Barbados and all the rest of the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. Sargassum is a major threat. It's a health concern. It's affecting tourism. And this project will actually use both aero drones and underwater drones to not only determine where the sargassum is, but what's the volume of sargassum that's contained. Now, the intention with this project is to be able to then valorize or monetize the sargassum by harvesting it before it hits the beaches, and then using that harvested sargassum, biodigesting it and creating renewable natural gas, which can then be used in vehicle transportation amongst other objectives. So this ties very closely into Barbados's intent to go fossil-free by 2030. So that's going to be a big challenge when you've got a whole fleet of vehicles on the road which are still running on internal combustion engines. What do you put into those IC vehicles? And so this is part of the solution. Now, the clever thing with the mapping that they're doing is that they're able to, the project will allow specific mats which are going to hit beaches, tourist beaches especially, to be identified and harvested. So you're not harvesting all the sargassum, you're now targeting it. And so that's just a couple of examples about 2 projects. As I said, there are 9 altogether. I can't go into details on all of them, but it gives you a flavor of the kind of potential that I think Hit Reset has to bring some real value to the Caribbean and help us take a big step forward. We just had an incredible kickoff meeting in Suriname. One of our consortium partners, AdeKUS, Anton University of Suriname, hosted us for a kickoff meeting for Hit Reset, which combined with the Caribbean Urban Forum 2023 conference. That was, I think, an experience for all the projects and for us as the executing agency. We had technical assistance from OACPS present, very, very rigorous technical assistance, which made us go through all our log frames and project design, reformat them, and I think that was an example probably, or an experience that a lot of experienced project executors and project managers might not even have had before. So I think this demonstrates how the project is also bringing capacity, bringing value into the region and into those of us who are involved in development projects. Another really nice thing that came out of the kickoff meeting is that, of course, the project teams from different parts of the Caribbean got to meet each other and talk about their projects and hear about these different projects and realize, we'd have seen it from our level, but they, at the project team level, now got to see how much synergy there is between these different projects and start to make links and recognize how data and information could be transferred, methods could be transferred back and forth. So I think Habitat is going to be one of the contributors to that in your, I've forgotten the name of it again, PASA method. Right? So I think that's going to be a really good value to some of the other projects, and they'll be back and forth. And that's really important because we're not just looking to, as I said, deploy technologies that exist outside, but we're looking to build an innovation ecosystem where we have the capacity in the region to actually respond with innovative solutions to our own problems. And so I think that connectivity between the projects is really germane to our capacity regionally to do that. So we're very excited about what came out there. So let me wrap up there. And again, thank you, Habitat, for hosting us today and for this kickoff meeting for your project. I thank you all for attending, and we're really looking forward to some fantastic results from this project and the others on the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. King. The information presented was actually very intriguing, so I think we're all looking forward to the results of the different projects. So before I invite Project BRC to be presented, we do have a representative of SEDIMA, Dr. Nicole Greenidge, via Zoom. She is the Disaster Risk Management Specialist, and she would like to bring greetings. So Dr. Greenidge, all yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning to everyone. Good morning, Honorable Minister and all distinguished guests. All protocols already being recognized. I just want to bring very brief greetings to say that SEDIMA is very excited to be a part of the Hit Reset project. Our role is in comprehensive disaster management and ensuring that we can achieve sustainable development through comprehensive disaster management in the Caribbean region. And Trinidad and Tobago is one of the participating states of SEDIMA. We do have the Office of Disaster Management in Trinidad and Tobago, and we are quite interested in the Habitat for Humanity project as a partner on the project, which particularly is looking to ensure that we can predict the impacts of climate change and disasters and be able to respond to those in a proactive fashion. We were quite interested when we saw this project that would be seeking to assess the vulnerability of coastal communities and not only look at vulnerability assessment, but to also be able to conduct disaster risk reduction awareness and training, and also the innovative element of the project, which would be the dashboard that would provide updated GIS data to influence decision making. There is a comprehensive disaster management strategy for the Caribbean, and that is aligned with the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And there are two key priority areas of that strategy to which this project aligns with and helps to support. One relates to our priority relating to decision making, informed decision making through evidence based information. And the second priority speaks to, which is priority area 4, speaks to building resilience in communities. And so through this project, we are hoping to really boost the evidence that we have available in the Caribbean for decision making, and to be able to facilitate a united approach towards building community resilience. In fact, SEDIMA is working right now on a community resilience framework, and that community resilience framework has a number of critical areas. The hazard information and the risk knowledge is very important, but then there are other pillars of community resilience. At another time, we would love to share more on that, and we look forward to working more on a Caribbean community risk information tool, secret, with the University of the West Indies. And what we hope to see under this project is strong partnership between SEDIMA and Habitat for Humanity as we work to ensure that we have the tools that can collect that GIS information on vulnerability and so forth, but then that we are able to approach community resilience building in an agreed fashion for the region, where we not only identify what is the risk in the community, not only identify the warning systems, but we are able to build the capacity of persons to respond. So having said that, in summary, I just want to commend this project, and we look forward to partnering with you to see a resilient Caribbean building from the bottom up with community resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greenidge. So now, I would like to invite Mrs. Jennifer Messiah of Habitat TT and Mr. Shane Ragbear of GISSTT to present Project BRC, Building Resilient Communities.
Thank you. Honorable Minister, it's a distinguished pleasure to have you here this morning. We meet after a couple of, maybe a decade and a half, and I'm glad that we're meeting like this because everybody knows that once you encounter Jennifer, you're in for trouble. We don't let you go, one way or the other. And I'm going to follow up on those promises made a decade and a half ago. Thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you are all so very distinguished. I'm not going to call all of your names, so please pardon me. I know it's not good to say protocol observed, but in the interest of hearing the project, I am sure you'll agree with me, we need to get on with the project. So I'm trying with my P's from policies to positioning habitats in the puddles. That's where my P's stop. That's where we are. And so people probably wonder, you used to do housing. Why are you talking about policy and coastal communities and resiliency and sustainable communities and sustainable cities, SDG 11? And that's because Habitat has positioned itself globally that we are very concerned on the effects of climate change and disasters. What has disasters done and likely to do? What are the seismic predictions? And where are our communities heading? And so we have positioned ourselves globally to sit with the policymakers and help them to understand some policies need redrafting, some needs to be created, but doing it from a bottom-up approach. And so we sit with our communities and we work with our communities through a particular methodology that you'll hear about in this project. And it's one of the selling methodologies that all of my colleagues in the other programs that will be rolled out, other projects that will be rolled out, they're after us to share that knowledge, and we are willing to do so on the PASA methodology. So as we begin today, Shane and I will share the platform. Shane is the president from GISSTT.
Hi, nice to meet you all.
And so we have the long and short of it all, and we'll have the mic somewhere between. Building resilient communities, and okay. Well, the project is going to be 18 months, and it's going to end in December 2024. We're going to do a bit of GIS mapping, and I will not going to venture into any explanations on the technological side of things. That's where Shane comes in. But what I want you to do as we share today, I want you to see where you are an important partner into the execution of this project. So all of the stakeholders in this room, whether you be policymakers, local government agencies, the planners, the university, apart from monitoring what we do, how you can get involved, and I already have the EU commitment to join us in the community. We'll certainly take that up. Everybody will be involved. I am not here to tell you the effects of climate change. I think we've all have experienced it, and we know what we're talking about. But as we go on to the other slide, so that's some of the effects of climate change. We want to show you in a predictive map, between 2030 to 2050, we do understand there are some of our communities that will be taken over by the effects of climate change. And there's going to be serious degradation, there's going to be serious loss of all kinds of things unless we have an intentional intervention. And so our mapping is going to take into consideration the kind of communities. Shane will explain how we will do that mapping. And then we will take that mapping and have mitigation projects that will be designed. And this is where we get Monica to agree that there will be another EU grant. That smile means yes. Thank you so much. We also have the Chamber of Commerce here. And so, you know, it's not by accident that you're here. Because habitat is in the communities when a disaster happens or if a hazard happens. Honorable Minister, we with all of your 14 DMUs. They know our numbers backwards and forward. We share the platform. As they do assessments, we see it in real time. As we do assessments, they see ours real time. Serious collaboration on the ground. And so we can see John's house is sliding off of the hill, and Mary's house, roof just blown off. And so CEO Self-Help is here, and the collective collaboration says our intervention can be integrated. And so what we need, the equation would be the chamber signing the checks, Self-Help agreeing with the DMUs, and Habitat Underground. This is what the assessment will do. This is what the assessment is indicating, and this is how we will respond. So whether there be disaster kits that we stock up, or whether there be shelter kits, or feminine kits, or baby kits, depending on what the intervention is needed, Habitat is there with the folks on the ground to intervene. And so it's not just about getting data. That's critical. Going beyond data is the response and the mitigation that is really resilient, building resilient communities, and making sure our capacities are built down on the ground, and the project will tell you how. In a 5-step approach, we're going to be developing the index. That's a digital thing. Then we will be identifying the vulnerable coastal communities out of that index. So something is going to be created. The mechanisms Shane will share. Out of that, we will select 10 coastal communities. We will do a number of field exercises, including the PASA, which we'll explain in another slide, and the GIS mapping. Then a modeling application is developed, and then we do some implementation along with the data analysis. So Shane takes it here.
Thank you, Jennifer. So hi, good morning, everyone. You're hearing me? So I could raise this a bit. Right, so I'm here to take you through the technical overview of Project BRC. So four major steps. We're going to identify the vulnerable communities. That's through the development of a coastal vulnerability index, which will then be used to identify 10 communities for mapping. Once that is complete, we're going to develop the mapping application and dashboard frameworks. So this is a key aspect of the project, where we're going to use mobile applications. So basically, we're going to have mobile tablets or mobile phones where the persons in the community as well as the project teams can go in there and collect data. That is going to be tied directly into the analytic dashboard framework. So basically how it is, once you collect data, that automatically populates this dashboard. So you get live data. Once that is developed, we're going to go into each of the communities. So we're going to conduct aerial surveys. So I know Dr. King mentioned some drones. We're going to actually purchase some drones as well. We're going to do updated aerial photography, which will also be used to evaluate the resilience and the infrastructure of all of the coastal features. And we're going to be on the ground as well, mapping and identifying the vulnerabilities. So for example, if buildings are wooden versus concrete, if they have roofs that are going to be blown off, and these sort of things, we're going to identify all those, and that's going to be quantified into a resilience score. And then we move into the monitoring of the resilience itself, which is the dashboards. So we have a DRR aspect of it, where we're going to recommend strategies to develop and build the resilience of these communities, and this is going to be evaluated over a 5-year period through access to all of the stakeholders to this dashboard. So, Graciela. So I'm going to talk a bit on the project so far. So this is the model that we're going to be using to develop the coastal vulnerability index. So we're using indicators such as DMs, erosion, geomorphology, and rivers. This data was actually contributed to us by the IMA. And some socioeconomic indicators such as population, buildings, roads, points of interest, land use. The University of the West Indies also contributed some of this data as well as coastal forcing, the sea level rise, which Jennifer would have mentioned. We then use a multi-criteria decision analysis model, which is basically a weighting and ranking to weight and rank these variables to identify which communities are vulnerable. And we're going to produce the vulnerability maps. So we have some initial results based on some of the data we collected so far. So as you can see, we have, as well as building materials, if there's need for like developing of more drainage and these sort of things. And as I said before, interactive dashboard is going to be display all of the map data. So a key thing is once this data is collected, we're also going to overlay that on top of the updated aerial photos. So I'm not sure if there's any GIS users here who use Google Maps and whatnot. You see like satellite imagery, Google Maps, and these sort of things. Sometimes you get some cloud cover, sometimes you get very low resolution. We are hoping to get some very high resolution imagery. So when you get that and you log into the dashboard, you see very up to date. As well as some of the imagery that we have, I think is from 2014, the last aerial photo surveys. So this data actually helps build the national data infrastructure, geospatial infrastructure, of the country, which will be available to the key stakeholders as well. So this is as we get into, as I mentioned before, drone surveys, aerial photos, the physical infrastructure, and the socio-economic data will be collected by the parser. So Jennifer, if you want to speak on the parser a bit.
So as I was explaining to the Hit Reset group in Suriname over the last few days, the Caribbean likes a little bit of rhythm, and so don't confuse PASA with PASA. PASA stands for Participatory Approach to Safer Shelter Awareness, and it's a vulnerability mapping that will be conducted down at the grassroots level. It's where we get into the community and we do the walkabout, and we talk to the families, we do historical profiling. So you have the little grandmother that understands where things existed 50 years ago, 70 years ago, and doesn't exist right now. And that's the kind of information that will be collected in the first instance. Then we will continue, and there's an 8-module exercise that will be conducted over 6 to 8 weeks. A report is created and an action plan. The beauty about this particular methodology, so it's a vulnerability methodology, is that the community gets to identify their own vulnerabilities, and they get to say what they think would be the answers to fixing those vulnerabilities. They also indicate what kind of resources that exist within the community. For example, the guy with a pickup becomes very valuable in the time of a disaster or a hazard, because he might be the one to take the man that's in a wheelchair that lives in the track or the trace. All right? We also get to identify the vulnerable families that don't have access, or if an ambulance is to come into the community, they just can't drive beyond a certain point. Where are the houses that are vulnerable, that are likely to slip, to have landslides? And so we are able to gather that information in what we have called now, for Trinidad and Tobago, you know, we always got to be a little bit different from the world. So it's PASA Plus for Trinidad and Tobago, because we've added these action plans and the mitigation instruments that will be able to fix, including the stakeholders. And that's why for every intervention, we want to make sure that the stakeholders are fully updated in what we have to do and how they can get on board. So that is what the PAS is about, from historical gathering of the data by the community, trained by Habitat, to the mitigation plans. So we're gathering demographic, historical, and spatial data. There are also going to be lots of sessions for capacity building, as you will see in the next slide, where we do the disaster risk reduction strategies. We do some training on disaster preparedness. We help them to prepare a disaster risk reduction plan, and we get the communities to understand God really perhaps was or is a Trini, but he also has become a couple of other nationalities. He's taken them a little bit more seriously, and we've got to take disaster seriously. And so we need to make sure that our communities understand not only what a go-to bag is, but how to pack one and how to have one ready. So at the end of the exercise, all of our communities are supposed to understand disaster resiliency, but they're also supposed to do something about it. And so in our disaster training, we will ensure, and then we will take it a little bit beyond that, because it's Habitat, to getting other partners involved beyond this project to implement the strategies that will fix some of our communities. From policy to repairing houses, to fixing a couple of drains, to getting town and country approval, or getting people, Dr. Kurt, to appreciate the need for town and country approvals. I think the next slide is Shane's.
Yes. Right, so after the PASAs and the disaster resilience training is completed, this is where the monitoring of resilience comes in. So this is actually the key value of the project, where all of this data is available via this dashboard. So for example, let's say we identify a building that has a vulnerability score of 1, because it's wooden, there are no hurricane straps, there's poor drainage, whatever other reasons that we identify. Once we develop that strategy, the person now, or if they're going to get funding, they have the ability to build that resiliency. So for example, if they change their walls to concrete, if they build drains, that resiliency score is going to be improved. So you might see that it moves from a 1 to a 5 to a 7 to 8 to a 10. The other key factor is that we actually going to aggregate all of this information to one major vulnerability score. So we have the micro, each building is going to be identified and increased, and then we're going to collate all of our data to one major vulnerability score. So you may have a community that's ranked at 50, so it's going to be highly susceptible to flooding, to landslides, to these sort of things. But as we build the resilience of each individual infrastructure, that score improves, and that score may move from a 50 to a 60 to a 70. And eventually, you could actually say, okay, we have had an impact in these communities. So that's going to be monitored for 5 years, the next 5 years, and onwards. Access to that dashboard is going to be given to all the key stakeholders, the DMUs, the various government agencies. So it's going to be very interactive. So anyone who wants to have information, who wants to provide funding, provide grants to build the resilience of these communities, they have access to data, which is going to be giving you that ability to decide where you want to invest, where you want to focus on. And as I said, so basically the local communities also will have access. Everyone will be able to be able to log in and see what's going on, because ever-changing is going to be live. And we can also update aerial imagery as we go forward. And it's going to be very interactive. So I think that's really the key value and the key innovation of this project. So I think, yeah, we went through there. All right, so let me hand over to those.
So we're about at the end. At least you're wondering how many more slides. I think it's this and then a thank you. So we will have the interactive dashboard. The community will take ownership by the time we finish with them, because we have been doing this PASA methodology, and we have become, if I may say modestly, the experts in the PASA Plus methodology. And we'll continue monitoring that dashboard. The project ends 2024, but for another 5 years beyond the life of this project. So then your question to me, I know you're dying to ask, so who funds that? And it's a simple 3-letter word. So you got that. It's you. And so we thank you for your support as we move into the other phase after 2024. What are the expected results? Simple. The map, action plan for 10 coastal communities, 600 persons will be trained, perhaps at an average of 60 per community. It may not work out like that, depending on the demographics and the density of particular communities. But at the end, 600 persons will be trained, and then we will have access to the GIS data, which will be shared with ODPM, TEMA, and some other strategic players of the government for planning and policy purposes. And of course, we'll continue implementing with stakeholders to monitor and continuously upgrade those communities, so no longer should they be vulnerable after we would have encountered them. And this is where we get to expressly say thank you so much for your time, and that's the end of our talk.
Thank you very much. I'm sure some persons may have some questions, so feel free to socialize and ask those questions after. Okay, so now for the feature remark, I would like to invite the Honorable Faris Al-Rawi, Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. And may I properly abuse that privilege of saying all protocols observed. So I'm in a t-shirt standing in front of you, and on my chest is the national crest, and there's something called I am LG, hashtag. And today, Dr. King, thank you for introducing one expressed concept and one not expressed but implied concept. You talked about existentialism. Folks, we are facing the opposite in terms of the battle at times. So there's this battle between existentialism, but there is, for those who are not quite focused, there's a reality of something called nihilism. God doesn't exist, things are bad, I can do anything. And in Trinidad and Tobago, I stand before you in a rather unique position. I spent 7 years as the Attorney General of this country, Minister of Legal Affairs. I drafted over 650 laws, and then my boss gave me the biggest challenge I ever had. He said, time to put the rubber to the road. Because planning, strategizing, legislating is all really good on paper. How about making it work? And in the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, we are 30,000 people, 18 entities large. Most people didn't quite appreciate how large the ministry is. We have a budget of nearly $3 billion, but we're the coordinating entity for all the laws that I passed. So, here's some of the connectivity. Because in saluting the work and the project that we have today, I'd just like to put us alongside the argument and then to ask you for something. And I'm not asking you for money. Not yet. So, I've had a unique perspective. The government has had a perspective of building what I call a combination effort. My mantra is plant and machinery, people, processes, then law, and now I've added on time. There are 5 factors. So my mission is exactly 26 months long. It could be 29, because legislatively under the Constitution, you can have an election 3 months after your end of term. So 3 months after August 10th is the maximum time you can go, 2025. That's my time factor. In that time, we have the ability to drive policy to try and make reality by reforming plant and machinery, people, and processes. In developing the law, I had the pleasure of drafting significant amendments to the registration of title to land package and the registration of deeds miscellaneous provisions package. What is that? That was me becoming Minister of Legal Affairs and inheriting millions of records all on paper. Millions. The company's registry was running on a XP Windows platform, 12 computers daisy-chained connected. XP, Windows XP, I kid you not. The births and deaths registry was fairly advanced, but the land registry comprised over 4 million records all on paper. What we did was to digitize, and I took the first step in digitization processes in a very significant way for Trinidad. I, against the banking community's very best wishes, Dermot, you'll remember, closed the registry and moved it from South Key to where it is now, and then began a very aggressive digitization process to put all our paper into electronic format in a new system called the PBRS system, the Property Business Real Estate System. We launched a new computer registration system, which is now gone to CROSS, which is about to be launched fully digital platform, and we did births and deaths. And we combined that with GIS mapping, and in the GIS mapping, we took aerial surveys, and they exist, they're called land tiles, so we have pictures of Trinidad and Tobago for the last 100 years aerially. So you don't only need to speak to the granny to know what the coastline looked like 60 years ago. We have pictures of it. They're called land tiles. They're at Lands and Surveys at the Ministry of Agriculture. And we've done the GIS mapping under an EU grant, and that EU grant allowed us to roll out the Registration of Title to Land Act to convert all land into one system of registration. But that involves identifying who owns the land. And where you're going to hit your head after you do the mapping and the survey is how you're going to touch land that you don't own. And if you went back up to the map of Trinidad that we had up a little while ago, Shane, you saw a little highly vulnerable map around San Fernando. I can tell you now, that high vulnerability is equal to 2,400 people at the Marabella train line, 700 people at the Hatter's Pan Yard, out of 25,000 people, comprising squatting communities that have been there for 60 years that don't have title to the land they're on. So how do you spend public money, tax-paying money on squatting land? Becomes a real issue. That's where nihilism, there is no God, I don't need to comply with rules, I could just go and save myself and do it myself, meets the reality of the public purse. So how do we combine these factors? How do we celebrate the fact that private sector is seeing what government sees for the first time in a very real way? Because we could map, we have the data, we have GIS data for all of Trinidad and Tobago. The Ministry of Social Development has all of the vulnerability studies for those 2,400, 700 people, income category, number of people living in the household. We have all of that. We know that Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad in particular, suffers from, if you notice recently in the last year, you'll see that I've put up a lot of mapping from rural development. You'll see river course levels, you'll see heat mapping. For the first time in the history of this country, you'd have seen a Minister of Rural Development go and take control in a storm. Because we have the BACOs, the municipal police, the DMUs, we're actually the second responders after fire and police and ambulance. So what we stepped into, and which joins your purpose, we in the ministry are combining under one label all of the resources. And the one label is local government reform. What is contained in local government reform? Planning and Facilitation Development Act. I drafted the act. Dr. Kirk, you're here. That piece of legislation is how you get approval, which is the opposite of nihilism, because you have to comply with building standards. We talked about a wooden structure that's hurricane strapped or not hurricane strapped receiving a score. I'll give you 3,400 that can't even meet there. People that have built in the sea or in the river and have 9 people living in the house on squatting land. These are families, these are people, these are human beings who just don't believe that the rules apply to them because of the reality of the desperation of their situations, or the traditional approach to how they got to where they are because their families have lived there for 50 and 60 years. So Planning and Facilitation Development Act, that's in local government reform. The National Statistics Agency, another law which I've drafted. That law tells you exactly the statistics and the metadata behind poverty, rankings, structures. The next one that we have is the Registration of Title to Land Act, where we combine all the GIS mapping to every piece of land in Trinidad and Tobago. The next one is the Property Tax Act, which is built on the back of the Valuation of Lands Act. And that is one of the most critical pieces of work for the whole of Trinidad and whole of Tobago, because if you know what you own, you know who is on what you don't own or own. In other words, then, squatting is a very real phenomenon. The data tells us that we have 375,000 people asking for housing in Trinidad and Tobago, and we have some 250,000 people living in squatting conditions in Trinidad and Tobago in a population of 1.4 million people. That's a lot of people, poor and forgotten. So is it that we're just speaking holistically, or is there a plan? In the property tax arrangement, we become a pot that is much larger than 5 million euro. We're putting in excellent policy and structure behind 5 million euro. And I commend Peter Cavendish, one of the most amazing ambassadors for the EU, following after Daniela Tramacheri and others. Fabulous guy. Peter walks with his money, and he talks quickly, and he's a technocrat, and give him my best regards. But, folks, let me give you this in a real example. In the property tax arrangement, you're going to figure out by assessing each piece of land what you own or don't own. So as you map and you plug it into the Registration of Titles to Land Act, and you plug it into the Miscellaneous Provisions Registration of Deed Act, and you plug it into the GIS mapping, you're going to know every inch of Trinidad and Tobago, what is owned and what is not owned. What is environmentally sensitive land, what is coastal exposure and difficult in terms of structure, what you can or cannot spend public money on. Because many people call me as Minister of Rural Development and say, my house falling, I need it fixed now. How all your government so wicked? That's a really expressive word, right? Wickedness. But then you go and you assess it and you realize, listen, it's not state land, it's not vested in the corporation, and you cannot spend the state money on a $2 million retaining wall for one home, because now you have difficulties of expenditure that is public exposure, right? So you have to understand the realities of how important it is to know what you know or don't know. So we've been on a vesting exercise in the Ministry of Rural Development. The last time we vested lands in corporations was in the year 2000. We have completed the schedules minus one corporation to bring the vesting orders up to date. Because we want to plug it into local government reform, check it by property tax, but here's where the pot of money comes in. The pot of money comes in because, I'll give you an example. The Tunapuna Piarco Regional Corporation is a large area. It goes all the way from the north coast down to the eastern main road, in a big chunk pretty much in the middle of Trinidad on the north, right? The Tunapuna-Piako Regional Corporation asks the ministry every year, they say, listen, we need $101 million to survive. In the year 2021, they got $8 million. In the year 2022, they got $13 million. This year, they got $43 million. Because I went with data to the Minister of Planning and to the Minister of Finance and said, listen, I need to spend this money because I've surveyed it to bring a certain result, local economic stimulation, development, factors, etc. But a large part of the money that we're spending on is digitization, and I'll come to that in a second. So they're getting $43 million this year. They have a deficit of just under, they want $101,000, right? $101 million. The property tax for the Tunapuna-Piako Regional Corporation, giving them only residential land, only residential property taxes, is going to yield $67 million a year. And you know what that property tax is going to be? For top of the tier $1 million mansion, $10 in property tax a day. For middle average Trinidad and Tobago, $2 to $3 a day. For people with land value under $18,000, $0 a day. But we've just closed the gap. And that money put into local government reform, which says turn on the Planning and Facilitation Development Act, turn on the Registration of Title to Land Act, turn on the Valuation of Lands Act, turn on the GIS Mapping Act. We're talking what you talking on a national level. But where is the advocacy for that? How come nobody says, I am LG, hashtag. I stand behind supporting that. I believe that policy-wise and philosophically and existentially that I support that because there is a legitimate aim. Because we can't build resilient communities of a meaningful nature unless it's an all-of-government approach. And all of government means that we need to drop the sarcasm and drop the foolishness. If I did a poll in this room and I asked people to name us ministers of government, put us up against a wall with numbers 1 to 23 on our chest, you wouldn't cross 5. If I asked you to say, I'll do an example, Shane, because you're a brave man. The public service is run by the Public Services Commission. They hire and fire. Local government reform, we're saying, give the power to hire and fire to the corporation. So you're no longer in the bramble of, well, that person not performing, but they're on suspension 15 years, and they're taking half pay, and 20 years later, they'll drop the case and come back. Who is the head of the Public Services Commission? Dr. King, who is the head of the Fire Services Commission? Dermot, who is the head of the Judicial and Legal Services Commission? You must know that one. Chief Justice. We know one. 60,000 people that are public servants in this country are run by service commissions, and you can't name more than one person with the power to hire or fire. Local government reform says, not only give me property tax to meet the gap, not only allow me to operationalize the data collection, but it also says, give me power to manage. Make the corporation a full-time executive. In a full-time executive, give them Section 85 of the Constitution powers, which is the power to control your CEO. Now, in my 26 months ahead of me, within 3 months, within 80 days from now, that becomes a test. And there will be a low voter turnout. Can nobody care? That ain't for me. That's somebody else's problem. But for me, it's the reason why I took the job of Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. It's where rubber meets the road. Time to operationalize all the policy and laws that we developed. And worse yet, the ones that I wrote. So the test is on, but I just can't do it. And we can't achieve a better society unless there is public advocacy for what makes sense. I'm not telling you to vote and support any particular complexion, red, yellow, white, green, whatever it might be. I'm just saying what matters to you. Clearly, everybody in this room, it matters to you, resilient communities. We are building in the Marabella train line 400 homes right now. In 2016, there was a fire on the Marabella train line, my constituency. 2 houses were razed and burnt to the ground on Christmas Day. A candle fell and the houses burnt. It's squatting land. I went in to see my people and I said to them, what can we do? Self-help gives $15,000 per person and $25,000 per person. So I aggregated the families, collected the self-help monies, bought the material, and used the local labor, and we rebuilt the 2 homes, each for $80,000. A 20 by 20 on stilts so that you could build appendages and appurtenances to the property. So we are now back into these communities, building homes for $150,000, $175,000 by the hundreds in flood-prone lands, so they're on elevated platforms, etc. Because these are communities, and the land is not going to change the fact that people can't move elsewhere. So we have to build in the area that is most susceptible. That's what I mean by the data is there. We did all the social surveys, we did the structures. This exists in bamboo number 1, bamboo number 2. This exists everywhere in Trinidad and Tobago. The data is there. But the private sector has not been agitated enough to join in the analysis and advocacy. The advocacy is, what do you stand for by terms of policy? What policy do you support? Do we have the money to do it? We have a national budget of $63 billion this year. The GDP is over $160 billion. We now have the Public Procurement Act. There are lots of pieces all over together. So let me begin to wind up now. At the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, we have designed, by way of technology, data capture tools. We're in beta testing right now. I'm big into data. It's why when I started the fight to abolish child marriage, I went with the data to show you that 53-year-old men were marrying 12-year-old girls. I went with actual marriage certificates. When I went to deal with the creation of motor vehicle and road traffic demerit points as opposed to offenses, I said, if we created demerit points, we'll lose 104,000 cases in the magistrate's court. Instead of sending everybody a ticket to go to court, which is an offense, take a demerit point. 104,000 cases became 20,000 cases, and we collected, I wouldn't tell you how much revenue we collected. We collected a lot of revenue, but we got a 65-year low in road traffic deaths. Because all of a sudden people are like, oh, the speed limit changed. Or they're too wicked. Or they changed the speed limit to 80. We're like, no, we just enforced the law. We actually changed the speed limit to 100 later. But we enforced the law. So when you get into the policy side of reform, and you get into the data aggregation, at the ministry what we did is we built an app called Local, and the 2 gentlemen in this room responsible for those technology pieces, Makesi Peters, Shazim Mohammed from the ministry are here with us. We have a bright team in the ministry. And what we did is we built this app so that we actually go with a phone. And we're outside your house. And in DMU work, we drop a geopin, we fill out the data field, we send it to the back office, we track it on the other end so nothing is lost. It's the same way we capture our return of personnel. Do you know we have 18,000 people every day cutting grass in this country, but yet we have grass 12 feet high? Because there's no return of personnel, so you don't know where people are. So capturing presence and return of personnel, etc. But what we're doing is we're into open source data aggregation. So what we're doing, we're launching, we have to make sure, I feature a lot in terms of targeting, right? So the last thing I'm going to do is to launch an app and have it crash in day 2. So we have it in the field and we're testing it with our municipal police and our other people. So the open source tool is going to allow you to two-step authentication register. Faris Arawi is Faris Arawi and not fake news Faris Arawi times 20 sending old clips. Two-step registration, and then you send all of your information in. Streetlight blown, drain need fixing, neighbor involved in breaches. I want this one anonymous. Because you have to see something to say something, and you have to say something, you have to be protected. People are afraid. It's why I was an advocate for witness anonymity or for whistleblowing legislation, none of which I could pass without a special majority. But the point is, inside of this tool, we're going to call for data, and then we intend to share the data with Trinidad and Tobago. And I'll just give you, as a wrap-up example, imagine asking everybody, please geopin and send a picture of every blown streetlight in Trinidad and Tobago. Because usually people say, look, why can't you fix a simple thing like a street light? Oh, geez and ages, it's one light. All you do, wicked. You know what it ends up being? What's the cost? So we intend to produce a menu for Trinidad and Tobago to say, look, you can buy everything on the menu, you know. There's a tagline called cost. How are we going to pay for it? And what's the time frame to pay for it? How many steps am I away from a solution? Which is why we're using on our dashboards red light, yellow light, and green light. Red light, it's stuck waiting on an input that has not been received. Yellow light, it's pending and working and you can see where it is. Green light, it's in step. My ambition is to approach the national budget with a PowerPoint presentation identifying for you what the value for money expenditure is at the ministry. I intend to do that. Meaning whole of government accountability. So, in summary, I will say to you, BRIC is phenomenal. I am ready, willing, and available to plug all your data gaps. The data is right there. You could get it in a second. It's just a matter of aggregation. Advocacy-wise, remember I told you I wanted something? Advocacy-wise, when we do the unique data numbers, and you start to hear the opposition talk about right to privacy, no, we're not passing it, where will your voice be? Do you want to aggregate your data? So your WASA data, your TNTech data, your TT Post data, your GIS data, your Registration of Title to Land Act data, your Board of Inland Revenue data is in one data pin so you know who's who, to avoid fraud, to avoid positions, etc. Because if everybody pays, like in the property tax scenario, $1 a day, $3 a day, or $10 a day, we good, you know. How did I get to $10 per day? The property tax is calculated as a percentage. It's 3% of the annual rateable value. So we're going to take what the state will estimate to be the amount that you could rent your house for. It's not going to be a US dollar rental and a super rental. You're going to take the housing allowance of a minister's $12,000 a month. That's supposed to be super grade housing. So a very wealthy home at super grade is going to be $12,000 a month. 12,000 multiplied by 12 is 144,000 minus 10% for vacancy, multiply by 3%, divide by 12, divide by 30. I'm not even using 31. You get $10.81 a day. That can't be that hard. But that translates to $67 million more in Tunapuna Piako Regional Corporation, which meets the gap between $43 million and $101 million, which allows us to give you the data, which allows you to know if you're building on state land, private land, etc. Can you spend the EU money on squatting land? So who are you talking to? Your most vulnerable people are going to be squatters. So we're just going to pretend they don't exist? Are we going to do that? Or do we regularize the squatting conditions by land tenancy under the Land Settlement Agency Act, the Security of Land Tenure Act, the schedules? You're kind of getting an idea why I'm doing local government now, right? Because you have to know the elemental pieces to bring it all in together. So good luck in spending the people money. So you're going to spend it on land that people own. You catch my drift. I'm not raining on the parade or being nihilistic. I'm trying to say that the lenses through which we get to a resilient pot is going to be a complicated approach unless the state, and I'll say this to you, you're in the audience, a country is not a company. In a company, you can manage your balance sheet. Expenditure gets managed. Hard luck, you lose your job. We had to cut expenses. Can't do that in a country. There will be people in a country that you have to maintain that cannot look after themselves. And that we have a civic and moral responsibility to ensure we protect. And therefore, the state as its single part requires your advocacy on local government reform. Are you for or are you against it? There will be a referendum on that sometime before August 18th. Will you bother yourself to vote or not? Up to you. You stay home, that's a vote. You go out, that's a vote. I'm not telling you who to vote for, but it's a referendum on local government reform. Do you want property tax or not? Now that we have the public procurement law on, which, mind you, is one of the most difficult laws on God's earth, which will yield real problems, and mark my words, right? Do you have that lens of scrutiny going on now, which is a protection? But what do you stand for, folks in this room? Habitat for Humanity, policy and data and aggregation. Strip it all down. Are you existential in your thinking, or are you nihilistic in your thinking? Which way do you want to go? Thank you for introducing those terms to me today in your speech, Dr. King. The point is, there are choices afoot. The ministry stands ready, willing, and able in my 26 months at the helm that I have to run before that revolving door pushes. With my family every day smiling the closer we get to that mark. I'd just like to tell you that there's full commitment behind the exercise and position. Congratulations to you, Habitat for Humanity, and the EU and the University of the West Indies and your very many partners who have stepped into the breach, because now you're getting a taste of what it is to manage. Fortunately, you will not have to feature in memes, and you won't have to be the subject of odium and positions. I've gotten pretty used to it. It's a little rough. It's a little rough. But your perspective matters, and you're a very important change agent, and your advocacy is going to make the difference. So the reason I'm wearing the t-shirt is that I have 140 people that I'm onboarding today as change agents in local government to do the data handshaking between the 14 entities, the corporations, and the ministry. Because you can't tell people reform and you don't put somebody there who knows how to do it. So you have to install people in. So they are currently awaiting my arrival, and then I have to do a Batman and Robin change and go to Parliament for 1:30 as well. So folks, thank you sincerely for allowing me to have captured you in this auditorium where you couldn't get up and walk out. A politician at a microphone who happens to be a lawyer is a dangerous person at the mic. So thank you for your patience and your understanding. Congratulations to you. I pledge my full support and the ministry's resources behind all that you do. And I definitely do remember that you have an incredible memory for promises and undertakings. So I'm marking my words before you in a room full of witnesses, and I wish you the very best of luck. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very, very much, Minister, for that powerful address. Okay, so now we would like to wrap things up. I would like to invite Ms. Carleen Puran of Habitat TT to give the lovely vote of thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Well, it's nearly noon, and Honorable Minister, we've been agitated. You've inspired us, and I am grasping your offer to collaborate. It's going to be good. So I thank you very much for your endorsement and your support, and we're looking for greater collaboration, because over the years we have been working with the regional corporations and the DMUs, and it's critical to the work that we do. We can both support each other. Monica McLean, thank you very much. To the European delegation to Trinidad and Tobago, though you are funders on Project BRC, we anticipate more involvement, and my conversation with His Excellency is, yes, he's willing to come out, and we will get him out soon as he returns from vacation. To SEDEMA, our regional partners, we appreciate your support and your guidance, and hopefully we'll be able to collaborate on the vulnerability index that they are launching also. Hit Reset Caribbean. What can we say? It has been a journey so far. And we only just started. That's the thing. We thank you for your guidance, training, tremendous support. Dr. King, we thank you for sharing the insight into the projects. But special acknowledgement goes out to Perry and Olivia, who continue to be the lifeline for us in clearing everything up. Thank you very much. To Habitat for Humanity's Area Vice President, Ernesto Garcia Castro, and to our regional and global colleagues, we thank you for your continued support. We know that you will be monitoring our progress, and Andres, who heads our Caribbean office in Barbados, will be seeking funding so that we can replicate this project in other Caribbean islands. To our community leaders and groups, we thank you for your willingness to join hands on this journey. We are the communities. It is us. We need to do it for ourselves. GISSTT. You are ready to create this project with us. A phone call, and then just everything coming to play. We are pleased to be working with you, and yes, we have a lot to learn. Part of this project will be knowledge transfer, and I'm looking forward to when Shane will be teaching us how to use the drone, and we'll be able to check it out and use the other. I mean, we had our GIS training before, and we had our TIMS training, but now it's a drone time, right? To the Habitat team, you rose to the challenge. Sometimes I believe I come up with the projects, and Jonathan and I will sit and bounce it back with the senior team. But at the end of the day, the implementation of the project, it's the Habitat team. And I thank you for your continued support. And I think this project, we're going to have lots of fun going out to the 10 communities and being part and helping them forge the way for their own resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished guests, we thank you very much for taking time to come out today to learn more about this project. And we pray that you are inspired and you can see from your lens where this project can benefit or where you can contribute. And we welcome everybody aboard. On your program, sadly, it's my telephone number on, but please feel free to contact us. Let us know how you want to be involved, and we can do it. To many people, safe journey home or to your next appointment. Thank you very much. On a note, there are light refreshments outside the doors on the patio. Please enjoy. Thank you very much.